Hey there, folks. This is Jay Frost speaking to you from Command Central at the Philanthropy Mastermind series. So happy to have you back. And I hope you'll be joining us both within the chat and within the Q&A. We'll be trying to monitor those as we progress today. I do want to give a quick introduction to our guest, and then we have a tight 30 minutes today. So I want to make sure we dive right in and let her do most of the talking. So I won't be reading all of her bio, because if I tried to do that, you wouldn't get to hear from her at all. I will tell you this: if there are leaders at the intersection of tech and social good, it is people like Devi Thomas. Devi is at the helm of much of that activity at Microsoft, a company we all know because we're probably all using their products right now at this instant. But what you may not know, and what we won't be talking a lot about today, of course, is all the things they do in the world of philanthropy. What we will do is get a small inkling of an insight into that intersection of social good and technology, and particularly with respect to AI. And in fact, the way that we had met, and so she made time for this today, is to meet at the kind of one of those inaugural meetings of fundraising.ai, an effort which is undergoing a lot of growth right now. And in fact, there's a major conference for that coming up soon. You'll be hearing more about that in the series in the days to come. What I will say right now is just that it's great to have you. Debbie, thank you very much for making time for this.
Of course, Jay, thanks for inviting me. This is exciting to be here.
It's great to have you. And I know you're out in Washington right now, so different time zone. So I appreciate you doing this between meetings as well as in a different time of day. We started this conversation talking about this learn-it-all mindset. That was something you came up with for the title of this. And if you don't mind, I love definitions. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it certainly didn't come from me. This is something we've heard our leader Satya talk about a lot, and I've certainly heard from other, sort of corporate cultures. Creating a growth mindset within any organization, whether that's nonprofit, for-profit, some profit, is certainly the way that we see employees and the organization overall, get behind a shared vision, and also be able to attract talent from outside that sector, and that you wouldn't normally otherwise attract, because you're bringing in people who are really good at learning something new. So I refer to myself as the nonprofit girl at the tech table. And in order to do that, after 20 years in nonprofit, and to come into technology and to try to understand some of these pieces, I had to apply this very journalistic approach, right? I'm investigating, I'm asking questions, and I'm effectively not being a know-it-all. I'm being a learn-it-all. And so when I first heard that term, I thought, well, that's exactly what you have to do to be able to bridge the divide between, some of the worlds that we live in social impact, because very often we just define ourselves by a sector we're from, or in the nonprofit sector's case, it's defined by what it's not. So we try really hard to define what it is. And this just has constantly been this way that we have formed our identities and our career identities. And I thought, well, what if we just said we're all part of the problem-solving sector, and we're all going to be learn-it-alls in that sector? And this is really kind of how I look at my sort of trajectory and the chapters that existed within my career, particularly moving from nonprofit to tech. So I would define learn-it-all as just the opportunity to approach anything like you would approach figuring out how to put together a new, piece of furniture that comes into your house. And you need to read the instructions and put all the pieces together, or maybe a research project you've done in school, and attacking it that way, asking why constantly, figuring out who the experts are and what the sources of information are, and are they the sources that you want to helping you out and giving you your path. And the other thing I'd say is to be okay with failure, because that seems to be the biggest lesson that I've really learned from this industry, is that we can make mistakes and continuously learn from them. And that, I think, is something I'm trying my best to apply to every piece of, the social impact journey that we're all in.
You answered a lot of the follow-up questions I would have had, and some of them have to do with terminology. I love that you're describing this as a problem-solving sector, and I don't hear enough of that. We all struggle with this, that what we're not rather than what we are. And I
Yeah.
don't want to ask you where that came from, but rather ask you how people are taking the idea of adopting that concept, as well as the concept of we got to come to our work with humility so that we can continue learning. Do you think our sector is in a place now where we are prepared to kind of put aside that prejudice of our past experience and be open to learning new things and thinking about what we do and not what we don't do?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's hard to generalize and say that the sector is entirely in one way, right? We don't really, even within the causes, within, the NGO nonprofit world, we have very distinct ways of doing things. But one of the approaches that consistently has had, compelling results has been community-led, right? Local solutions.
Right.
And that has required us to check our egos at the door, particularly for the larger nonprofits or the program teams that I worked on in my time in the sector, and to come in and to say, okay, this isn't working here. Let's try another approach. And the way that the sector has traditionally sort of dealt with this has been to, look at an approach, find the funding, find the right partners for it, get those subject matter experts together, and then work with the community to execute on that approach to reach as many people as possible. Where we've struggled is scale, right? And replicability. How are we replacing replicating this in other areas? How are we applying efficiency to these models? Because there isn't a lot of time for that failure, to try something and then to realize it's not working, right? That's not something that the nonprofit sector has had a lot of time doing. The fail fast mentality has not been very much applied there. So where I see the value now is in the nonprofit sector learning a lot from sectors like technology in how to apply that, the trial and the opportunity to maybe fall down and get back up again and try again. And a lot of people will say there's no, with the sense of urgency that we have around a lot of these causes, there's no time to do that. So this is where we have the opportunity to take on some of that burden across the sectors. And this is why I refer to the fact that there's so much going on in problem solving today, and let different sectors like technology and others be that approach to be able to absorb the mistakes that can come in, so that the nonprofit sector can continue doing the right things and making lasting change in the way that they've done in the past. The other thing that I think is really interesting about the nonprofit sector, and again, generalizing, even though I realize there's so many different angles and types and sizes and shapes of nonprofits, is at being innovative, just being so scrappy and absolutely understanding that we will do anything and whatever it takes, and bring collaborations of people together that wouldn't otherwise have seats at the table together. And I really, really think that no sector does that better than the nonprofit sector. And I have seen that time and time again with types of partnerships that have developed in technology and between the health sector, for example, and nonprofits, where the nonprofits still are the subject matter experts on how to create lasting change and how to do this right within a community field. The health sector provides their scientific approach, and the tech sector provides the technology. And when I look at those types of trifectas, I'm more and more convinced that there are blurred lines, right, between these sectors. We really can all do this together because we have these shared goals. And those type of partnerships have always been really fascinating to me.
That's the best use of blurred lines I've heard so far. But we did have a comment in the chat, which I wanted to reference because it was talking about that scrappiness that you just referenced, Devi, and that person saying that they love it because of how entrepreneurial it is. But also you talked about this this hesitancy about failing. And I wonder, is that largely because we haven't given ourselves enough oxygen or enough fat or enough whatever it is, enough resources so that we can fall down and get back up? Or is that what's the cause?
Well, our funding models are changing for
Mm,
the nonprofit sector, right? And by our, I don't mean Microsoft's, I actually mean, our as a sector, as a
right.
nonprofit sector. And I think, in order to be a good learner, right, regardless of which sector you come from, you just have to be willing to make mistakes.
Mhm.
So the number one area that I think we could give ourselves a little bit of grace in is to be able to, we really revere perfection, and a perfect way of looking at things.
Mhm.
Perhaps we can transfer some of that respect to, learning from our mistakes. And I think this is where I believe that the funding models are sort of getting in the way, because we're thinking to ourselves, a donor has invested in us, or has invested in our use of unrestricted giving to create this strategy, or has invested in a technology to be able to make this particular program last. We really can't fail, because there could be a limitation on that donor's dollars. we
Mhm.
we can't go back and ask for more, or we could be in a situation where we feel that, guilty for having, used the funds towards something that didn't have exactly the outcome we hoped. But I think, the small trials done consistently, and tweaks and learnings along the way, that daily iteration, that can really lead to large learnings over time. And so that's the piece that I'm sort of hoping we try on a little bit more. And this will lead obviously to our conversation on AI. But
Mhm.
to me, that is exactly where I feel we could give ourselves some grace to be able to try on in ways that are, moderate, and make sense for the sector and the work that we do.
One of the things I hear some people talking about is going to a conference, and I've heard this just in the last few weeks, and asking how many people have heard of AI, which seems like a funny question, but everyone raises their hands, and
Yeah,
then asking how many people are using it and how many people are using Chat GPT. I guess it's really knowingly using it, not like a
yeah,
Netflix application, and very few, maybe two or three people in the room. So
yeah,
I wonder, as AI now is generally available in one form or another, either
yeah.
embedded in products or through things like ChatGPT, where you get it directly, is that going to allow us to do some of these things that you're talking about? And if so, how? How do we use those tools to advance ourselves in a way that gives us a little bit of grace to try
Yeah.
things out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three things about AI that are really important are to make sure that it's accessible, which OpenAI has done, I think, in a lot of ways, because you can leverage ChatGPT no matter, if you have an internet access, right? So that's, in that way, it's probably not incredibly inclusive, but it's certainly accessible to most. And is it, ultimately something that can be applicable, right? And this is where I think, and I can certainly help with this in my answer. You have some practical solutions and practical ways that I apply
Mhm.
Chat GPT to my day to day. But we can certainly understand there's applicability across all of our kind of roles, right? Across all of the ways that we think about doing our work. And then the last bit is it something that is learnable? And that's the piece that I think is the most exciting, because prompt learning, or prompt engineering, as they call it democratizes the way we think about technology and technology development. Now, all of a sudden, I guess we're all coders, aren't we?
Right.
Because we are using natural language to code, and that is a language that everyone understands. And it has global reach, because it can be done in multiple languages. So I think with these three, AI has sort of opened the door a little bit to allowing, folks in any sector, but certainly in the nonprofit sector, to establish a culture of learning. And it's got to start from everywhere. It's got to start from the folks that are working in programs and on the field and in the ground. It's got to start with volunteers. It's got to start with the CEO of your nonprofit, the COO, right? There are all of these incredible tools to be able to establish this culture of learning, and to sort of know at what point do I have to say, okay, I've learned this bit, let me move on and learn the rest, because there's so many different types of AI that we talk about. So certainly in my universe, for example, I try AI for the most mundane tasks sometimes, right? I'm writing an email to a speaker for an event. Perhaps if you invited me to be part of this and you used AI and you looked up my name and you put it in and you said, these are the way that this is what I'm looking for in Mastermind. This is what Mastermind series is about. We could really see what comes out of the large language model. And what we notice there is that at the end of the day, it always needs the human edit. And we are in this situation where now we're learning to edit in brand new ways and adding a human connection to what might otherwise be a fairly robotic response. The other thing I'm learning is I did a form recently, and the form was essentially a Microsoft form, an M365 form, to get some feedback. It was a survey, and it went out to about 400 stakeholders. And within the form, I used AI. Again, I said, these are the things I want to find out. Here's the key takeaways I want to come back with. And what I found in doing that was that the form helped me to understand how to structure the questions and how to format them. What it didn't do a good job of is understanding my audience. And I really had to come in there and again provide that level of human edit and human connection, and really to be able to adjust the flow in a way that would make sense to my audience. And I found myself once again iterating, learning, and understanding tone, because what I put in is what I get out. And I was crafting my tone in ways that were either polite or that were, flexible or agile language, because I wanted to make sure there was some adaptability in that answer. So these are the ways that I think we're now learning a new kind of engineering, and we're all coders getting in there, coding the model to work for us.
It's really interesting because one of the conversations about AI on the fear side of the equation is it's coming to take all of our jobs. It's something we've heard about all the differences. And I don't mean to diminish the importance of that, but you and I have talked about this separately, and I hope you'll address it now about how AI actually can help in this kind of talent problem that we have in the sector, where it's a matter of attracting people. And I wonder if there's an analog to what you were just saying with editing, that it's one thing to just, say, generate a post for LinkedIn. It's another thing to have it be in a voice that's meaningful to the audience. Is that same sort of dynamic at play when it comes to, I don't know, talent acquisition or people utilizing these tools and being better employees? Or how do you think about AI in the relationship to talent for the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, I think the talent crisis in the sector, it is probably one of the saddest statistics to me today, particularly because we're in a situation where, nonprofits are not able to fill existing vacancies. And then when they do fill these vacancies, you're finding that the level of talent that they get is not, where the sector needs to be. And you're hearing that a lot. And that they're saying has a lot to do with the pay. It has a lot to do with burnout, mental health concerns. And when it comes to roles like fundraising roles, those numbers are all of a sudden doubled. So we are really seeing a pretty significant crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Where we think there might be value is in understanding transferable skill sets. And I think this goes to my opening where I talked about this idea of moving from nonprofit to tech, and that journey that I was on was recognizing how transferable the skills that we apply as fundraisers, marketers, and nonprofits are to every sector that's out there, and how, again, our approach to learning in the sector and our approach to entrepreneurial scrappiness can really be something that transfers over. And that's a reputation game that we have to play a little bit, is to show people that this is a fast-paced environment where we make decisions consistently that save people's lives. So those outcomes are massive. And that ROI, right, is huge for talent in the sector. And that's one area that I think we could probably use a lot of, focus on. But where AI could really help is that when you join a nonprofit team that is leveraging AI to increase productivity because they need to save time, to spend more time in the human engagement side, and is leveraging some of these skills like predictive modeling for donors, for example, or understanding how to look for patterns in data using AI because they're saying, I've got to go out and reach these Gen Z donors because they're the donors that are going to help both advocate for my cause and give to it. When you start looking at things like that and provide that sort of analytical mindset that AI requires you to have, this is where I think the talent pool will understand that these skills that I now have learned in a fundraising and marketing role in a highly digital environment, which my nonprofit is, those skills are setting me up for success in multiple sectors wherever I go, because I now understand how to, with the click of a button, look at a data set, or I now understand how to create, a generative image on all of my marketing materials using, Bing Image Creator, or I now understand how to create 400 personalized gala invitations for my upcoming fundraising gala in the blink of an eye, because I have used prompt engineering, I have used predictive modeling and machine learning, which is a type of AI too, right? I've used all of these different tools within my digital tool set. And that's exactly where I think technology has the biggest place to offer to nonprofits, is to be able to say, here's tools and technology that is bespoke to the sector and to the work that you're doing. Use these tools and technology, and you'll be in a situation where not only will you see gains in productivity, but we're going to be able to attract more talent to the sector that's excited about using these tools and technology and gaining skills in that. This is sort of the area that I'm hoping will be able to transform that reputation a little bit of how the sector is to work in, right? And that it's not this continuous place that doesn't pay well, or it doesn't, give me the perks I need. It doesn't give me flexibility. I think there's all of these different ways that we can start talking about chapters and skills that you can learn in your career if you start a nonprofit.
It does sound like there's room for a lot of adaptability, both for leadership in the organizations today who might use this as an opportunity to attract a new generation of really talented people who are open to learning these tools. And then also to maybe think about how much they're paying them and how they're talking to them and what kind of autonomy they're willing to provide for them, whether it's working at home or whatever it is. And you've just kind of outlined one crisis. Another one that people talk about a lot, I'm not sure how you feel about this, is whether or not there's a crisis in terms of the donor population, the percentage of people who give in the United States and other countries, and whether or not some of these tools that we're talking about and the people who are comfortable learning from them and working with them are going to be able to address that problem. First of all, do you buy the generosity crisis concept? And if so, is there a tool set in here, or is there one emerging that will help us?
Yeah, I think there are three main sort of very compelling trends that I'm seeing that I'm going to maintain optimism around. And the first is the rise in trust-based philanthropy. And I think here what we're really seeing is an increase in unrestricted giving. I think the last, I think it was a Center for Effective Philanthropy report, was 48% of nonprofits. I think it was 500 leaders who responded to that survey, and they said there was they reported a reduction in grant restrictions. That's a pretty big number coming out of this year. We also saw a 40% increase in multi-year contributions. So more and more, we're seeing a reduction in what we're seeing as the unrestricted versus the restricted giving. That line doesn't exist so much anymore. A lot of employee giving campaigns, a lot of campaigns that we're seeing coming out of nonprofits have, effectively campaigns that will contribute towards investment in the strategy and in the portfolio of work the nonprofit is doing. And I think that that trend is very, very helpful towards making sure that, you know, this generosity crisis, or this area of growth that the nonprofit sector might be feeling is, you know, is they're struggling with, particularly with inflation today. We can see that sort of scaling back if we see a rise in trust-based philanthropy. The other thing that I think is really interesting is the rise of Gen Z as donors. I mean, what an incredible generation here that, you know, I was following NRDC, ARC, some of these nonprofits on TikTok, and watching the sheer sort of Gen Z plus TikTok interaction around these nonprofits and their causes, and their ability to not only generate excitement and create movements and advocacy around these causes, but also the ability to get everyone else to give, right? The primary reason why millennials and Gen Z give to causes is because it makes them feel closer to their sense of purpose, and because their friends are giving. And I think if we lean in on that why and that motivating factor, we all of a sudden understand that these digital marketing tools that we're putting out there that personalize and that help you get out to new crops of donors that you wouldn't normally reach out to are so critical. And within that diversity also comes donors from other regions. There are donors in parts of the world today that we have never reached out to. We sort of continue to look at boomer generations in wealthy nations. Well, some of the donations and donor statistics and giving that we're seeing coming from countries like India, Nigeria, Brazil, these numbers are staggering. China, philanthropy in China has a whole other sense of movement about it. So I think if we start thinking about donors in different ways, and this is where these tools will help us because they give us the data we need to be able to direct attention to who we think will be most interested and likelihood to give for these causes that we care about. So I'm constantly curious about how the rise of trust-based philanthropy, the rise of Gen A and Gen Z as advocates, as volunteers, as donors in multi-generational giving households, by the way, because often it's the boomer and the Gen X that's giving in the same household. I think that's really, really interesting. The third thing I want to say about giving that I'm loving and I'm watching is just this notion of, looking beyond individual giving and taking a look at things like DAFs, donor advised funds. I'm taking a look at, the cryptocurrency movement. I'm not sure where that's going in philanthropy, but I've certainly been following that trend. And then looking at crowdsourced funding and how does that change the way a nonprofit is now able to fundraise. So if we start to diversify our product portfolio and diversify the way that we actually reach out to donors and look at things like DAFs, which are not just for the wealthy, there's donor advised funds that you could give to regardless of what income bracket you're in, that all of a sudden just creates this whole other opportunity for nonprofits to look at generosity, but from new audiences.
You're sitting there within Microsoft looking at all this, and Microsoft is a big company that we all know, but we don't really know well. So what does it mean to be looking at these issues and thinking about them within the context of Microsoft? How is Microsoft itself thinking about this transformation that we're all living through right now?
Yeah, it's such a remarkable time to be here. I have to say that, particularly with this AI revolution that we're in, and to watch innovation just come every single day. It's such a fast pace, and it's, consistently pushing us. And then to be able to use the tools within the tools, right? That's what I get to do every day because I can pop open a Word document and there's my chat GPT. So that's the type of thing that I think is really exciting. But, I started this call by saying I'm the nonprofit girl at the tech table, and I plan to remain that always. But what Microsoft has always led with is a growth mindset. You come in and you learn. You learn how the company works in all of these locations around the world, and you understand how that technology can help everyone. So the number one thing I would say about being at Microsoft today and being in philanthropy at Microsoft today is that the role of Microsoft is to democratize this AI. Satya has said that across the board. You've seen that in every statement that we've put out there. So to create a developer through the GitHub ecosystem or others, out of everyone, to be able to really leverage AI in every task you do, if you're just using an LLM, to be able to acknowledge that skilling and in AI is meant for everyone and can actually create new roles and new flows for workforce development. All of that is what it's like to work here. It's a total investment in growth and learning. And when you're part of a learning culture, there's really nothing that can stop you because you have the grace to make mistakes. So bring it back again.
That does, but maybe as a last question and a last thought, Microsoft is the big picture, and it was so helpful to hear that description. But you also are really dedicated on the outside of that, and so you're involved with, I think it's the executive board of Project Scientist. So there, you're keeping, direct involvement in working with girls and young women in tech and STEAM. So how are you seeing all this play out there in the lives of the girls that you work with? And you're looking, forward to those being the nonprofit girls at the table or whatever they're going to be, because they'll have a lot of choices that maybe my generation, maybe even those in your cohort didn't have. What does it look like for them?
Yeah, Project Scientist is just an incredible organization. I've been incredibly lucky to serve on their board for over a year now. And what I find to be most interesting is the applicability of AI within the learning process for the underrepresented girls. These are from Black and Brown communities, and we're global now. We're also in parts of Central and South America, and have this opportunity to really use that in the actual skilling and training of the girls, but also how are they being skilled in AI themselves and using AI in the context of these subjects that they're learning. And I think that programmatic lens in delivery, in both the delivery of, but then in the actual training of the communities that we're serving, is the great potential and the great promise of AI, right? Because it's not going to stop with just, one role and how your role is changing and how you're executing against that as a nonprofit, but all of a sudden it changes what you're actually telling communities to do. And this is why change is a process. It's going to take time, right? And that's what I'm seeing also being on the board and being able to still stay this close to the nonprofit sector. Look, Microsoft works with 300,000 nonprofits. So I have a real opportunity to listen and learn every day about how AI could be better, about how AI could be used in practical ways, about how a head of program somewhere or a head of marketing somewhere wants to leverage AI, both in terms of how they reach out to audiences, but in terms of how they deliver their services and work directly with the communities. So to me, what I'm seeing at Project Scientist is just a reflection of what's happening in other nonprofits out there of similar sizes. This is a small nonprofit, right? And we really want to be able to make sure that this is an inclusive space, right? There is absolutely no exclusivity to who gets to use these tools.
So Debbie, for those who want to learn more either about your work over there at Microsoft or about Project Scientist, how can they learn more?
Well, first, I would say, please go ahead and follow Microsoft for Nonprofits on LinkedIn. It's a great place to start. You'll get a lot of, input and understanding of how we approach AI and how we work with the nonprofit sector. And then for Project Scientists, I would just say head over to projectscientist.org or to our LinkedIn page there as well and learn about our Girls Change the World event that's coming up and understand different ways that we're trying to increase underrepresentation for young girls in STEM careers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to put those in the show notes and descriptions.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Devi, for making
Thank
time for
you.
this. Really do
No,
appreciate it. Love the work that you're doing on
thank
both ends of the spectrum there for all of us here in the not-for-profit sector. We really do appreciate you. And thanks to everybody who joined us today. We appreciate you, whether you came here live or you're watching this recording later. I hope you'll share some of this news, especially about her work at Project Scientist, with your friends who are interested in that. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow for another program. We have 3 this week. So until then, take care. Thank you, Devi.
Thank you so much, Jay. Bye.